Today we're doing a comprehensive review of one of my favorite AI projects. Today we're covering Bittensor, and we're going to do it very different to how many others have covered Bittensor. We're going to cover it in quite a lot of depth. We're splitting the video into three different parts. So firstly, we're going to talk about the problem with AI today and kind of how Bittensor is solving it, as well as giving you an overview of what Bittensor actually is. In the second part, we're going to talk a little bit more about the token, as well as the future of Bittensor. And in the last part, I'm going to give my bull and bear case, as well as my overall thoughts, as we like to do with these deep dives. So let's dive in, and first of all, let's talk about the problems with AI today. Essentially, I've written three different points on screen, but there are many others as well. Let's go through them one by one. So first point is really that AI is centralized. And I think many of you have seen this with the big tech giants, OpenAI as well, really kind of having the power over their AI models. And ultimately, this creates biased training models because we've got kind of decentralized organizations who are running it, and they kind of foresee AI how they want to see it. Ultimately, we have a lack of transparency with the data that they use too. You know, they probably use their own data sources, but it's not really open source, and it's not really available for everyone. This means that potentially there are more vulnerability points with these AI models. And, we see this time and time again, and this is kind of what crypto is really here for as well, that generally the power goes to a few away from many. And the idea is hopefully with decentralized AI models, we can kind of split that or turn that around the other way, where power goes to many away from a few. Second point that I really wanted to mention is really the costs with AI. I think one of the issues in Web 2, I should say anyway, is that the incentive system to build AI systems are kind of difficult to spin up. One of the reasons for this is the cost of compute. And I think this is one of the reasons why NVIDIA has basically been the one stock that everyone should have owned over the last decade probably. When you use decentralized systems, that can often spread and reduce those costs, and especially around with wider participants. And so this is like another problem that we have with AI today. And we're already seeing like a lot of GPU marketplaces pop up, especially in crypto today. You know, we've got the likes of Ionet, Akash, Render, where users can basically supply their GPU. These are GPU marketplaces. And also, we've seen the comparison between stuff like Filecoin for storage versus AWS. And these are like just really highlighting how crypto AI can really, really help to develop AI in future. But again, this is a problem, right? The way that kind of AI systems are built today are still fairly difficult to spin up. And like being closed source, right? Open source is faster. Open source empowers developers. It empowers researchers. It brings a lot more innovation. And that's what we like to see. Bittensor is basically trying to solve basically all of these problems. And we're going to go into kind of how all of this works. So what is Bittensor? It basically combines the power of blockchain and artificial intelligence. And we know that blockchain has many of these characteristics that help to solve these issues, including decentralization, open source, basically having tokens to basically help with costs and incentive structures. And when you combine that with artificial intelligence, you potentially get Bittensor. So by definition, it is a peer-to-peer intelligence market, and it has three main components. So the first main component is this incentive-based competition mechanism, where you can either create your own custom incentive mechanism for your own competition, or you can join a competition that already exists in the Bittensor ecosystem. And each of these incentive-based mechanisms is called a subnet. And we're really going to go into a lot of detail in this in the coming slides. So don't worry if any of this stuff goes over your head a little bit. We will cover it all. The second component of Bittensor is a blockchain that basically runs all of those subnets, these incentive-based competition mechanisms, and ensures that they function properly, decentralized, permissionless, collusion-resistant. And the last thing is the Bittensor API, which essentially connects all of the essential elements of subnets and blockchain, basically connecting them together. We're really going to go into a lot of depth, so don't worry, you will understand exactly kind of what Bittensor is. So subnets, I think, a nice way to think of them are basically AI experiments. Anyone can basically run one of these. There are many of these already, and we'll go through a lot of them as well in due time. So one of the reasons why I really like Bittensor is because when I think of like the overall AI stack, right, you often need a bunch of these different things. You need data at the start to really kind of feed your AI models. You need to store a lot of this data, and that's why we use some of these storage protocols. You then need to kind of train these models and fine tune them, and you need to host them as well. And like when you combine all of this together, you can basically feed them into Bittensor. Bittensor is the entire AI stack, and it will become apparent when we go through the different subnets why that is the case. So a question is like, why would anyone even bother to participate in the Bittensor network? There's so many other networks. Well, one answer I should say, incentives, right? And if you want to participate, you can basically become a miner or a validator or even create a subnet. There are incentives for all of you. And the incentive is via the Bittensor native token, which is called Tau. And every 12 seconds, a new Tau is minted or created. And that is distributed among all of the different subnets that are currently available. And this happens every 12 seconds. Now, in terms of what the distribution is, 18% goes to the subnet owners, 41% to the validators, and 41% to the miners. So basically like this, every single day, there's 7,200 Tau tokens, which are basically created and distributed as rewards. So there are incentives and rewards for participating in the network. And we're going to go through kind of a lot more of this as we go along, and especially in part 2 when we talk a lot more about the Tau token. So let's kind of explain it a little bit better, I should say. So the way that I personally like to think of Bittensor is to really think of Bittensor as a school. And I think of this school as having 32 plus classrooms and expanding. And the reason why I say 32 plus is because that's kind of the number of subnets. By the time you're watching this video, there's probably a little bit more than 32 subnets, hence why I've said, expanding. Now, within your school, right, you've got all these different classrooms, and each of these different classrooms has a different lesson. So one could be maths, one could be English, one could be biology, one could be chemistry, physics, technology, religious studies, whatever, right? Just think of every single classroom having a different subject altogether. And within each of these classrooms, you have a teacher and you have the students. And the way that I like to think of the teachers being the validators and the students being miners, right? Now, in each class, there are certain tasks that need to be done. And these are the tasks that are created by the person who made this classroom in the first place. And so the way that I like to think of it is like with Bittensor, you've got 32 plus different experiments going on. These are basically different tasks, AI tasks that are done. And you've got validators who are basically kind of checking the work that the students do. The students submit their tasks that they've done. They'll try and create the best AI models for whatever those specific tasks are. And the teachers are the ones who will validate it, or they'll basically mark it, right? This is basically how I like to think of it. And I think if you can think of Bittensor like this, you'll get a good appreciation of the overall architecture and kind of how it all works. So yeah, each classroom within the Bittensor school is a subnet. Each subnet has a specific problem or task that needs completing. Now this task is given to the subnet miners, which are the students. Validators or teachers each independently evaluate the task performed by the subnet miners. And the validators or the teachers basically express their opinion on the quality of the miners. And these are provided as a collective input to something called the Yuma consensus mechanism on the blockchain. And this is done using Bittensor's API. And the output of the Yuma consensus mechanism, which we'll talk about in a moment, will then determine how the rewards for each of the different subnet miners and validators will be distributed. So better ones will get higher rewards. Ones that are lower in quality will get reduced rewards. Now, the Yuma consensus is basically the agreement on the quality and value of the product from miners to validators. It's agnostic to kind of what is measured, but TLDR is an algorithm that determines like the tau emissions across the different subnets and for the miners within each subnet, and it calculates a somewhat average of the miner's output. So yeah, just for those who are kind of interested in the tech, I mean, this is a little bit complicated, but just in case you are interested in what the architecture looks like, you can also find this on the Bittensor website as well. But subnets are basically built in like a similar manner to neuronal networks, and basically each node within the Bittensor network is referred to as a neuron, and these are either miners or validators. And yeah, I've just put some images here just to kind of appreciate how this looks, because you have axons which retrieve information from APIs, dendrites transfer information across different axons, and you got the synapse, which is the main method that validators and miners use to transfer information. All right, I won't go into too much detail here. You can read a lot of this architecture stuff on the website itself. I think for me, like, my goal is really to just for you to appreciate the architecture, and I think the best way to appreciate this is via this school or classroom method. So let's actually go and have a look into these different classrooms or subnets and see kind of what are these different AI experiments going on. And on screen right now, you can see like this is fairly outdated now. I think this is probably like two months outdated, maybe 1.5 months outdated. But a lot of these still exist today. And in fact, there are probably a few more now as well by the time you're watching this. And these subnets are basically the different AI experiments that are currently going on, and each of them are completely different. They're created by different people. They have miners who are basically completing these various tasks. And some of the popular ones includes text-to-speech, indexing, fine-tuning, proprietary trading, which we're going to talk about as well, inference, and not interference, meant to be inference, image generation, protein folding, and compute. And we're going to talk about some of these different subnets now as well. So let's go into them. So let's talk about subnet 3 first. The reason why I found this interesting is because it is kind of like a consumer product. It's essentially a text-to-speech product. And essentially what you can do is you can build and share these AI agents or these chatbots, which are called shells. These are both for content creators and for consumers, because the creators can essentially generate these AI content bots, and consumers can find them and use them and chat with them and whatever. What's interesting is MyShell themselves actually raised $11 million, raised via Dragonfly and Delphi, and will definitely have its own token in due time as well. And yeah, so this is kind of what it looks like. It is kind of just like a chat bot. You can use it for any of the different characters that people create. And yeah, this is on the Bittensor network. Next, we've got subnet 5, which is Kaito. Kaito is really interesting because I think it's actually one of the best tools for researching stuff on chain or in crypto at the moment. And Kaito actually use Bittensor as an indexer for Web3 data. And so miners are encouraged on Bittensor to develop high quality and efficient indexing and basically ranking schemes for like different Web3 data. And the validators will submit structured or kind of retrieval queries to perform spot checks on these miners as well. And so, yeah, this is pretty good because by collectively executing large-scale content understanding, indexing, and ranking, a decentralized search engine and data analytics platform can be established on top of OpenKaito. And so, yeah, definitely recommend checking Kaito out. It's something that I've tried to use a little bit myself. A little bit expensive, but I think there's definitely some value there for sure if that's what you're interested in. But yeah, they run a subnet on Bittensor. Next, we've got subnet 6. They essentially work on fine-tuning. This is essentially an open source model that can be used to basically help developers kind of submit models. And this is the idea of it. This is to basically make the current AI models that we have a little bit better. So it started off as like an open source GPT-4. It basically takes a lot of the data, and essentially there's another subnet that constantly asks questions to GPT-4, and it basically generates new data from this. And so, yeah, this is like a data generating machine, and essentially it can be used to fine tune and essentially make these GPT models even better. So yeah, that's pretty much the point of it right now. Yeah, you can see that actually they have actually been able to improve these different AI models already, and they're able to do that just because they're able to just constantly gather as much data as possible. Data is, you know, you could argue like the new oil. And so, especially for these AI models, the more data you get, the better. So that's what Subnet 6 do over here. And I did watch this video from the founder. His name is the Mozilla. Yeah, I watched this a little bit hard to hear, but I watched it a couple of times just to kind of appreciate, the power of fine tuning and why it's so important to make these models better. Next, we've got Subnet 8. I'd say this is probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite. Definitely up there for sure. Now, this is a time series prediction subnet, and essentially this is all about using AI to help with trading. And the aim of this subnet is to basically create the most competitive and comprehensive algorithmic trading strategies. And they really want to use them for a variety of different markets. The miners on this subnet can contribute and compute basically their trading models, and validators will obviously test them out and see which trading models are the best. The focus is on financial markets for these prediction subnets. So at the moment, the focus is on BTC, but I think in due time, it will also be on altcoins, the Forex, and then the stock market as well. So what are Tayoshi actually building Subnet 8? Essentially, they are building this visualization prediction dashboard. And basically, you can see this in this image here. What they're trying to do is they're trying to create these predictions to essentially see where price will move in future. And that's what these red bands over here represent. And what they want to do is they want to create an automated trading infrastructure which you can then plug into your favorite centralized exchanges. So hopefully you will be able to use Tayoshi on Binance, on Bybit, maybe on chain as well in the near future. So yeah, predictions are currently made on the 5-minute BTC chart. So also the other thing is predictions in near time are more important than the ones in the future. Bigger magnitude of swings equals more rewards for miners. They're still obviously fine tuning it, but I think this is a really, really interesting one. And yeah, pretty stacked team. They do quite a few calls, which you can listen to on YouTube. Yeah, definitely recommend having a look into this subnet, but it's definitely one of my favorites. Yeah, I think if you're able to create really, really competitive AI models that can be used for proprietary trading for Bitcoin and who knows, altcoins in the near future, I mean, I can see massive demand for that. Next, we're going to talk about Corcel. Corcel are basically focusing on inference, which inference, for those of you who don't know, is the process of running data through a trained AI language model. And yeah, essentially what they do is they combine the power of multiple centralized large language models into one. So they have a suite of current products. GPT-4 actually is out now as well, so they currently have that. They have an AI image generation, editing, manipulation, area. They have a chat with AI characters. Essentially, they have a bunch of different consumer apps. So you can literally go on here. It's free to use as well. So for those of you who want to use the latest version of ChatGPT, you can go to Corcel and you can try it out yourself for free here. So yeah, you can see these are some images that I created. I wanted to create an image of an oil painting landscape with the sun shining down on some hills, and yeah, Corcel was able to do this for me. I was able to use the AI chatbots to have a chat with Mr. Bean about what his thoughts were on Bittensor. And yeah, they have an AI token deployer. They have lots of cool stuff. They do a Bittensor art of the day using Corcel. Yeah, you can do all kinds of things on here. And yeah, this is basically combining the power of multiple centralized LLMs into one, all on chain. Yeah. So let's go next. Number 25, Subnet 25. This one's super interesting, and I think probably one of the reasons why I'm interested in this is because of my medical background. So this is and this is where I think Bittensor is really going to go in future, really just focusing on science and innovation. And this subnet is all about protein folding. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a background. I don't want to give you a full biology lesson here, but essentially every single cell in our body is made of proteins, I should say, and these proteins are made up of amino acids. And essentially, amino acids are really important because if you're able to figure out the structures of some of these different proteins and basically how they fold, you are able to figure out new medications, cures or treatments to certain diseases. better the sustainability of the medications and treatments that we use today. And this is like a problem that scientists have been having for quite a long time. Like, how do you figure out the exact structure of these amino acids and kind of how they're folded to basically make proteins? There's many of them that we just haven't discovered yet. And how does Bittensor kind of fit into this? Well, these guys, Macrocosmos, have basically started a subnet themselves on Bittensor, which is called with AlphaFold, which is actually an AI system developed by Google that helps to make predictions on protein structure based on its amino acid sequence. And essentially, by running a subnet on Bittensor, you've basically got these miners who can basically submit their AI models. They would usually have to wait months and have to get funding, which is very, very difficult in the science world. And instead, they can go to Macrocosmos, submit their protein folding models, to get the compute, get the incentives as well that they need, and validators can, decide on the specific conditions in which these proteins must be folded, essentially collect tons and tons of data. And this can really potentially help to improve the world that we live in today. Maybe this subnet could actually figure out some of these different protein structures with the AI models from AlphaFold, and help to innovate and basically change the world by discovering medications or some new disease treatments in future. So who knows? But I think this is certainly the way that Bittensor appeals to me, and very, very excited about this one. So I think by the time you're like got to this point in the video, hopefully you've got some idea of the value of Bittensor, how all of these subnets are so different from one another, how they're all individually running their AI experiments, and kind of some of the value that can come out from them as well. And I think recently we did actually see like a lot of FUD on Bittensor, right? Eric basically saying this is like the most dumbest coin ever, like what does it do? It doesn't do anything. And I think like one of the reasons is like he probably didn't spend enough time going through all of the different subnets one by one to really appreciate what they are and what they do. Is Bittensor useless? My opinion on this is no, absolutely not. It is very useful actually, and I think subnet 25 clearly demonstrates that. I think if you don't understand the value from that, then go and watch this video again from the start. But I think there's a lot of people who spread FUD kind of about the usefulness or uselessness, I should say, of Tau, and I think it's often just good to just go and spend a little bit of time just to like look into these different subnets and really get a good grasp of what actually this is, because I'm a big fan of it now. To answer the question, no, I don't think it's definitely not useless. So I think that wraps it up. In part 2, we're going to talk about the Tau token, so make sure you go and check that out. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for part 2.